I'd like to call the June 12th, 2014 meeting of the Williamsburg City Council to order. Jerry, would you call the roll, please?
Here.
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 Here. Here.
First order of business today, council minutes from the meetings of May 5th, May 8th, and the special meeting of May 14th, 2014. Are there any additions or corrections?
Mr. Mayor, I move the council approve the minutes for the May 5th and May 8th, 2014 meetings and the special meeting of May 14th, 2014.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please? Ms. Walton.
Ms. Newsom. Aye.
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 Next order of business is matters of special privilege, and the first is the Business Appreciation Award for Ace Hardware. Terry, if you and your team, and Michelle, if you would meet me at the podium. Got a few words to say, and then I have something for you. I won't take it out of the box because I would drop it and break it. So I'm very pleased today to announce on behalf of the Williamsburg Economic Development Authority and City Council the winner of the 2014 Business Appreciation Award is Ace Hardware. And here to accept the award is Terry Deaver, the owner, and you have your team. Would you like to introduce
I have
them?
my son Brian and my son Kevin. We didn't plan on
So there wasn't a memo this morning.
well, either that or Brian forgot.
Well, thank you all for being here today. And I'm going to say a few things and then give you a chance to make some remarks. The Business Appreciation Award is given to a local business that is remarkable for its customer service, innovations, and contributions to the community, all above and beyond being a successful enterprise, which in itself is no small feat, even in the best of times. A beloved and long-standing local institution where you almost always run into someone you know, Williamsburg's Ace Hardware also has received national recognition, earning multiple high-performance retail and Dealer of the Year awards from the Ace Corporation. For the past 25 years, the store has enjoyed a strong client base despite big box retailers such as Lowe's and Home Depot opening stores nearby. When Lowe's opened a store nearby, Ace remodeled and made significant investments in addition to raising salaries to retain key staff members. As a result, the store suffered much less than stores in similar situation and recovered in a few years. Ace is always on the lookout for new products and makes a point of reaching out to local innovators to help support them. For example, they featured Breathe Healthy products from an entrepreneur in the Regional Triangle Business Incubator. Ace is a long-time and reliable contributor to local charities. The store has sponsored Little League teams and contributes to housing partnerships, especially with in-kind donations of hardware, Children's Hospital of the King's Dominion, and Grove Christian Outreach Center. Ace has engendered loyalty not only among its customers and community. One employee has worked with the store for over 43 years, and 6 or 7 others have worked there throughout the 25-year history with the current owners. When I do a ribbon cutting for new business in the city, I always thank the owner who has made the decision to locate in the city. We know there are lots of options, and we appreciate that they've made the commitment to be here. Terry, on behalf of the City of Williamsburg and its grateful residents, I want to thank you for that decision you made more than 2 decades ago, and that you renew every year with your continued commitment to your customers and your community. Terry, congratulations.
I really didn't prepare any remarks. I really didn't feel like I was going to get quite this reception. I really wasn't sure what to expect, to be quite honest with you, but I certainly do appreciate all the accolades that we have. If it wasn't for my two sons here, it would be much, much more difficult for me to do this. When I came here 25 years ago, I think I've been to Williamsburg twice. I moved from Northern Virginia, as some of you may know, and it was probably the smartest decision business-wise I've ever made to move to this city. And I certainly appreciate what everyone has done for us. I'm sure Brian and Kevin feel the same way, and if they'd like to say anything, you're welcome to. But I know that I hope 25 years from now, it won't take us that long to get another one of these. But I probably won't be here to get it. But anyway, my two sons will. But I really appreciate it, and I didn't expect this, really.
Well,
thank you.
Terry, thank you. You make such a difference
Thank
in this
you.
community.
Thank you,
We
Clyde.
really do appreciate it. Kate, do you want to, were you able to get a picture? Or, yeah, if you would like to.
So hold this up and.
Should we get out of the way?
Kate, do you want us to hit the floor?
Just stand up there. Brian should be in the middle, so he's taller.
No, I just get on my tippy toes. I can't talk.
One more, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Thanks, sorry, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate all that you do.
Oh, appreciate it. I appreciate everybody's business. Thank you very much.
I was there today. I was there yesterday.
Yeah. I've got a hotel made out of Ace Hardware stuff.
Appreciate it.
I can attest to spending a lot of time in Ace Hardware and enjoying it. I'd like to take a brief minute here also to recognize someone that we've lost. On behalf of my colleagues on City Council and City staff, I want to publicly express our sympathy for the family of Lisa J. Judkins, who passed away on May 16, 2014. Lisa was appointed as Clerk of Council on January 1, 2014, to fill the position vacated by the retirement of Ms. Scott. While only with us for a short time, she was a respected, enthusiastic, and hard-working member of the city team and will be greatly missed. If we could just take a moment of silence to remember Lisa. Thank you very much. Our next order of business, public hearings. I was saying I don't think I've been in a council meeting with 5 public hearings at the same time, so we may be setting a record today. But we do have 5 public hearings, and we'll do them in order. The first is the sale of 901 Capitol Landing Road to Economic Development Project. Michelle, are you?
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of Council. Today, this first public hearing is to accept a purchase agreement for the property that the city owns at 901 Capitol Landing Road. Property most of us know as the Lord Paget Motor Court and the Quality Inn more recently than that. It was about 2.5 years ago, in November of 2011, that the City Council closed on the purchase of this property for a price of $634,000, plus 8% that went to the auction house that sold it and 2% to our broker. And then another $15,000 we spent on the FF&E, the furniture, fixtures, and equipment within the building that was held as collateral for an SBA loan. So that was negotiated. So that's the money that the city spent to purchase this property. After that purchase, we issued a request for proposals to go out to bid to find a broker to represent us in the sale, and we did that competitive process and hired RJS and Associates to do that work for us. And in February of 2014, we met Rick Wasman, who is the owner of Copper Fox Distillery in Sperryville, Virginia, where he's operated a distillery for whiskey and other spirits for about 10 years. And he was looking to expand, and I think everyone's heard the story. It was definitely a team effort, members of council, the EDA, city staff, and the community at large that really welcomed Rick's idea and encouraged him to consider Williamsburg. So his proposal to purchase the property at a $600,000 purchase price to be financed the first 18 months in an interest-only phase while he's doing the primary investing and renovation of the property, so the highest cost for any business. And then to be financed, amortized at 4% after that. The purchase is contingent on the purchaser, Copper Fox, doing its due diligence, like any purchase agreement, on the property. And it's also contingent on a special use permit process that will go through the city's normal channels, which is Planning Commission, and then ultimately back here to City Council for approval. That typically takes about 90 days here in the city. The estimated tax revenue more than makes up for the discounted price on this property and the financing of this property. But perhaps more important than that direct tax revenue is the fact that when the city purchased this property, its aim was to find something that could help drive traffic to this corridor of the city that's in transition. So we had talked to a lot of prospects for the property, including nonprofit schools, medical uses. One was even a timeshare project that ultimately couldn't make the financing work on the property. But this, we feel, is a home run in terms of economic development and getting private investment in this corridor. Rick is here to speak about his vision for the property, but it does include, along with manufacturing, aging, and selling spirits, a tour aspect where many hundreds of visitors will come to learn about how this process happens and purchase and taste the product as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I know we have a public hearing. Mr. Wasman is here with his family, his wife and daughter, who plan to live on the property. The rear of the property is zoned residential. They do plan to reside there. And another thing I didn't make clear is he will still be operating the property in the commercial enterprise in Sperryville. So Rappahannock County can't accuse us of stealing a business. It's an expansion. But also our broker, RJS and Associates, Vernon Getty, is here as well to answer specific questions, and Chris Shelton, the attorney who helped us through the process as well.
Terrific. Thank you, Michelle. Before I open the public hearing, I'll come back to council for any questions for staff.
I have one, Mr. Mayor. Ms. DeWitt, there is, this is not the entire piece of property, right? There is one lot that the city still owns?
Exactly. There were two pieces of property when we purchased, one on the other side of Forest Hill Drive, which is zoned residential, and the city is retaining that piece of property. That is not part of the sale, and we're investigating whether that can be sold as a separate residential piece.
Thank you.
To get that to the market as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? If not, I'll open the public hearing and ask anyone who wants to speak to this issue to please come forward. Mr. Wasserman, would you like to begin? Please do. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Let me start by saying the ability or the task, the job of bringing whiskey or spirits or adult beverages to the marketplace is something that I take as a real special privilege, and something that I think has always been important to me to be a stand for the responsible use of alcoholic beverages. I mean, it obviously has physiological effects, and we take that very seriously. But we also try and make products that are really great. And as seriously as we take that, I consider it a real privilege to have the opportunity to come to Williamsburg, to come to this city, to try and make something that I envision will be a a jewel, a real special distillery, a spot where people can see what pride and passion can bring to our industry. So we won't be trying to make cheap, mass-produced goods here. We're going to make something that's very, very good. So I'd just like to thank Michelle and everybody that has come to visit us. It's been an overwhelming, heartwarming response. The neighbors, everybody. It's been fantastic, and something that we're just, every time we come down, we get a little bit more excited. So I'd like to give my wife, Chelsea, my daughter, Camille, and I are very much looking forward to all the work ahead. And there is quite a bit of work. Today is just a first step. We've got a lot to do, but we're pretty enthusiastic about being able to accomplish everything from the zoning to the build-out. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Or
Thank you.
anyway, but thank you guys so much for this opportunity. We're looking forward to it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Wassman. We're looking forward to having you and your family part of our community as well, so thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this issue? Thank you. Please state your name and address or affiliation.
Bob Harris. Good afternoon, Mayor Hallman and members of City Council. I'm Bob Harris here today representing the Williamsburg Chamber and Tourism Alliance. We wanted to speak in support of the Copper Fox Distillery purchase and operation on the site of the former Quality and Lord Paget. The Alliance, you may know, is currently working with our tourism partners and our new advertising agency to promote our great destination with a focus on History Plus. We enjoy a strong brand awareness as a top destination for historic sites and experiences, but research tells us that it is important to also promote a variety of interests that resonate with today's visitors. The craft brew and distillery business is one of the new tourism products that we feel will resonate well with a large segment of our target visitor audience. In 2013, the Virginia Tourism Corporation statewide tourism plan research project, which was completed by PricewaterhouseCoopers, offered a key recommendation for tourism product development strategy for our destinations to develop tourism related to Virginia's growing breweries and distilleries, as well as developing product that links local distillery, wine, and craft beer products into tourism trails. While we have a long way to reach the amount of product of areas like the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, it is important to note that the Kentucky Bourbon Trail enjoys more than 740,000 visitors per year and had increases along the trail at their various distilleries of between 15 and 30% last year alone. This week, Estes Park, Colorado is considering a similar project in their community just outside of the Rocky Mountain National Park. In an article in their local paper yesterday, they noted that the craft brewing and distillery industry in Colorado has grown at a fast clip, increasing 85% from 2011 to 2013. As a result, the industry contributed $826 million to their state's economy in 2013. A quote from the article says, Estes Park needs to share that market. The expectations of people who travel to Colorado is that these things will be there. It's expectations we're not meeting yet. We ask that you support the Copper Fox Distillery project as a new business for Williamsburg that will support the local economy and particularly the tourism industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone else wish to speak?
Good afternoon. I'm Greg Granger, Williamsburg resident. I'd like to say I think this is a great idea for the community. I think when Anheuser-Busch located in nearby James City County, it made a difference to this community. When the winery became established, we came to know more about Virginia wines. And I think this is following in that tradition. And I'm thrilled to see that they're not only going to invest their money here, but they're investing their family here. I'm a lifelong resident, and I can tell you it's a great place to raise a family. And I'm thrilled to see you come in. And I think the notion of a business that will have a consumable product as well as a tourism aspect is just wonderful. So I'm delighted to see this coming to Williamsburg. Thank you for your investment.
Thank you, Greg. Anyone else wish to address council? Yes. Vernon, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm Vernon Getty, 129 Jones Mill Road. I too speak in support of this project. I think it'll be a great shot in the arm for this part of the city. These last several years, my wife and I have had the occasion to spend quite a bit of time in Charlottesville, Virginia, which, similar to this, has a number of distilleries, microbreweries, wineries that have become a very important part of their economy, attracting innumerable tourists, and it's been a real shot in the arm for that area, and I see this happening here and fully support this. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Vernon. Does anyone else wish to address this issue? If not, I'll close the public hearing and come back to council for discussion and action.
Thank you, sir. You know, a few years ago when we first began this process with the consideration of the purchase of the Lord Paget property and what the city's role in that should be, I think we all had some questions and we had some specific desires. Our thought was that if the city could step in, and assuming there was not another qualified bidder out there who's going to pay a better price, if the city could step in and purchase this property and have the patience to find the right second purchaser to develop the property in a way that would really benefit the city. We were hoping we'd find a business entity that would add to the tax base, be complementary to our tourism economy, and yet at the same time diversify that economy and help revitalize the entire Capitol Landing Road corridor. Maybe after a year or two, we might have thought those ideals were a little bit ambitious. But I think we found the right purchaser who's not only going to do that, but they're going to do more. They're going to add to this community the quality of a proven business with a track record of success and identifiable and a reputation for quality. They have a focus on Virginia-grown products and will produce an end product that will make this state proud. And they expand the theme of artisan and craftsmanship that I think has a real place in defining this community in the years going forward. So I just can't think of a better use for this property. At least none has come to us. So I'd like to thank Mr. and Mrs. Wassman, and especially Camille, because she's so cute and well-behaved. We really appreciate you making this decision, as Mr. Granger said, to invest in this community. And I know I'd also like to thank Mr. Singley's team for their role in this. And he won't be able to say anything, but Mr. Foster played an important role here. In conversation with other members of the community at the Blue Talon and working with Michelle DeWitt, using that real team effort, as Michelle pointed out, when we had this announced first over at the Copper Fox. If people aren't thinking about how can I make a difference in this community, how can I contribute, what ideas can I put forward, and if I make a connection, I'm going to do my best to fulfill that connection with the right people so that we can move forward. So, Scott, thanks for your role in that. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. I won't be commenting, as Mr. Wasman is a client of my future employer.
Yeah, thank you. A lot has been said, and it's all true. I think where I would only add to that is in what the Wasmans are bringing to the community also preserves one of Williamsburg's gems. When we look at some of the old other hotels that have been torn down, the old Raleigh Tavern Motel or the Quality in Mount Vernon, or the Governor Spotswood, those are parts of Williamsburg history that are no longer with us, and what they're doing is preserving, what's been on Capitol Landing Road for, decades. And so I'm appreciative of that as well as everything else, and looking forward to having you and your family come. And I think the offer that's been made is significant. When we did get into this arrangement, it was my opinion that the city ought not be looking to turn a profit on this deal. In terms of the sale price, the profit would come from the adaptive reuse of this property, and I think that's, we've got a win-win, so thank you.
We absolutely do, and Michelle said it right, it's a home run.
Thanks. Again, I think this is, I'll just echo what we've heard so far, but this is a win for everyone involved, and that's really important. And again, I'll stress the team nature of this, from casual conversations to detailed workings by attorneys to Michelle's work. It's just been a terrific team effort. So with that, I'll take a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that City Council approve and authorize staff to execute the purchase agreement for the sale of the property at 901 Capitol Landing Road.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Ms. Walton, would you call the roll, please?
Aye.
Mr. Pond?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Abstain.
Terrific. Thank you, Rick, and your family. We're looking forward to having you part of our community, so thank you. Our next public hearing is PCR 14-009, revised regulations for room rentals to visitors and for bed and breakfast establishments. This is proposed ordinance 14-13. Mr. Nestor.
Planning Commission has reviewed the city's bed and breakfast regulations, a work session on February 26. This was continued at the March 19th and April 16th regular meetings, and a public hearing was held on May 14th. And a few things were done. A definition was added for bed and breakfast establishments. It had previously been referred to as room rentals for visitors. So this uses the accepted nomenclature today. We had the same section of the ordinance regulating room rentals to roomers and to visitors. So we've separated out the room rentals to roomers and created a new section for bed and breakfast establishments. Many of the existing regulations were carried over. Bed and breakfast are still limited to the 6 existing corridors specified by the zoning ordinance that you see on this map. We've carried over the basic framework of up to 4 bedrooms. You need a special exception for the Board of Zoning Appeals. If you're on a larger lot, you can go up to 6 with council approval as a special use permit. Can be owner-occupied or investor-owned if the owner lives in the city. This is a change that was recently made. The owner-occupant or full-time live-in manager can have 1 non-resident employee. Our parking requirements for bed and breakfast are changed. But based on the Commission's discussions and considerations, a number of new regulations are proposed. Now, owner-occupied B&Bs, as proposed, could have a full-time live-in manager, which may include the manager's family. This had previously been limited to just an employee. Meals served are proposed not to be limited to breakfast, and they may be served against a person staying at the B&B, limited to double the B&B capacity. That's based on 2 people per room. But I point out that for non-owner occupied bed and breakfast, meals served to guests when there are more than 18 people served, and meals other than breakfast served will require a commercial kitchen. This is not the city's requirement. This is the health department's requirement. We're adding a provision that says weddings, receptions, and other special events are allowed by right at double the B&B capacity. They're limited to those on the 6 corridors that you just saw on the map. There's a new certificate of occupancy required. Events are limited to between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. No additional off-street parking is required. So the ordinance assumes that since there is not sufficient parking on the lot to accommodate these extra events, the ordinance assumes that the operator of the bed and breakfast will find a way to meet the parking needs without needing a specific requirement. Planning Commission was comfortable with doing it this way, and this is what they recommend. Now, weddings, receptions, and other special events or more than the by right number of guests would be approvable with a special exception approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals with a maximum of 50 guests. Now, you have in your packet a package of web pages that I found. There are a number of Williamsburg bed and breakfasts that advertise weddings, and that goes up to a maximum of 100 people. So this sets the maximum at 50 people. Again, a new certificate of occupancy requirement is required. The larger events are limited to one event a day or two in a 7-day period. Health department approval would be required for food service. Hosting weddings, receptions, and other special events could change the building code use group. It could require modifications of the building for Americans with Disability Act accessibility, for fire and life safety requirements, and increase or improve bathroom facilities. So what we're talking about here in the ordinance doesn't say you're automatically allowed to do this. You're given the opportunity to do this. In this case, if you go through the Board of Zoning Appeals process, public hearing, and you meet all of the other applicable ordinance requirements. Matt Westheimer, our Coast Compliance Administrator, is here if you would have any question about the building code requirements. Planning Commission held its public hearing last month. One person spoke. The Commission recommended by a vote of 6-0 that the proposed changes, as I've explained, be approved with 2 minor changes for clarification, which have been included in the proposed ordinance you have. That's proposed ordinance 14-13, and the council action that would be needed based on the Commission's recommendation would be to approve proposed ordinance number 14-13.
Reed, thank you very much. Before I open the public hearing, I'll come to council for any questions.
Mr. Nestor, you mentioned that if there's desire to host a special event that's above the by right number up to a maximum of 50, there's the requirement of BZA approval. What is the lead time and cost to an applicant of that?
The lead time, it's about 4 or 5 weeks lead time to get into the process, and I believe that it is a $400 application fee for Board of Zoning Appeals approval. Special use permit approval is $800 application fee.
Thank you.
Scott? Questions?
No questions.
Okay, thank you, Reed, very much. With that, I'll open the public hearing and ask anyone who wishes to address this matter, please come forward and state your name and address. Welcome, Bill.
Bill Talley, 709 College Terrace. I'm also currently the neighborhood representative for the Neighborhood Relations Committee, and it's in that capacity that I'm coming before you this afternoon. I've talked to several residents, and I have made some suggestions to the proposed ordinance that have been emailed to Mr. Nestor. It all deals with Section 5, and if you look at Section 5, everywhere else in the proposal, it calls the people that are paying to stay at the bed and breakfast a visitor. And anybody that is allowed to stay at the bed and breakfast that's not paying is called a guest. Well, in Section 5, the word visitor has been totally deleted. So if you allow double the capacity of guests, you're not counting the visitors, so now you're looking at an increase from 18 to 24. I think that's not what was intended, and I think that needs to be clarified. The other part is I made a suggestion that meals other than breakfast be served indoors other than at the special events. I know a lot of times when you start getting larger groups and in the cooler fall months you may like to have meals outside, and when you add people that are imbibing in alcohol and having a good time in backyards, especially in some of the smaller bed and breakfasts. They're on very small lots, two of which border my rear yard, that it can get quite noisy. So I'm asking that you look at that proposal, that meals be served indoors. Now, I'm not talking about the weddings and those kind of receptions that could be indoors or outdoors. That's one thing that I think that probably would be held outdoors sometimes. So with that, I thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Does anyone else wish to address this issue? If not, I'll close the public hearing and come back to council for discussion and action.
Could Mr. Nestor comment on Mr.
Yeah.
Callender's
Mr. Nestor, would
point?
you comment on the discussion of that, if any?
Mr. Talley raised these same issues at the Planning Commission public hearing. The Planning Commission felt that the language as proposed was what they wanted to recommend. I've looked at Mr. Talley's recommendations. If it was something that council wanted to consider, they could be added into the language of the ordinance. I think in the maximum, he is right that this says when we're talking about meals, it's separate. It talks about both guests and visitors in the total. When talking about the events, it just says the maximum number of guests is double the capacity, which, as it's written, that would be plus the visitors in the bed and breakfast. So if you wanted to make clear that the visitors were to be included in the total number, then you would want to make the change as he suggested. If you were comfortable with the visitors being double the capacity and the guests being double the capacity of the B&B and added to the visitors, you would leave the language the way it is.
So may I just ask an example? If the capacity of the B&B is 6 people, then the way it's written, it could be 12 guests in addition to the 6 people who could stay there for a total of 18.
Right. Well, now let's say that our typical bed and breakfast is 4 bedrooms, which is 2 people per bedroom, so that's a capacity of 8. So that would be, the by right would be double. That would be, you could have 16 guests plus the 8 visitors that are staying there.
So 24, right?
24.
But if it's a 2 or 3 bedroom B&B, then it's,
If
we're working off 4 or 6.
Right, if it's 2-bedroom B&B, that's a 4 capacity, which is 8. And so,
But may I
Sure,
ask a
please.
question here? There's a requirement that if the number of individuals served with a meal is above 18, that requires a commercial kitchen. Is that correct?
Correct.
So
Correct.
that, in many situations where, say, you had an event and a reception with a meal, that would be a potentially limiting factor for the B&B.
that
as
could
well.
be, although, as it was discussed, the question was asked, well, what if the meal, if you had an event and it was catered? Well, if it was a properly licensed catering company doing it, then that would supplant the requirement for a commercial kitchen.
Thanks, that's helpful. So, anything else?
No, the only other comment I had was, in listening to Mr. Nestor's presentation, I wasn't sure about the lack of requirement for additional off-street parking. It gives me a little bit of pause, but it's helpful to know that the Planning Commission was completely comfortable with that. So, I guess.
And in the case of above the by right up to 50, there is not a specific parking requirement listed for that, but one of the requirements of the application is to present a parking plan showing how you propose to handle the parking. It could be valet parking, it could be, if you're adjacent to a commercial parking lot, could be having permission to use additional parking. But that, the Board of Zoning Appeals would need to know that in the special exception application.
And so with an 8-person B&B, 16 guests, or in addition to the renters or whatever, the guests of the B&B, something about those terms doesn't work for me. That's not really that many more people than would be at a residential house party on a given evening. So that's it.
I agree. Scott?
Are we bound by having to go before the BZA for this special exception? There's no administrative track we could take, because 4 to 6 weeks seems like a long time to me. And, you That's true. That's true. But, I mean, it'd be fairly easy to have an event that could be up to 50 people that wasn't planned way in advance.
Now, the way this is set up, this is not an individual application to the Board of Zoning Appeals for each event. It's to be authorized to have events for up to 50 people. So if you went through, you had your parking plan, you met all the other requirements, and you were authorized by the Board of Zoning Appeals, say, you would not need to go back to them to get permission for each wedding you wanted to have, so long as you met all the ordinance requirements.
Once and done. That's good. That's good. That's different. Thank you.
And that takes care of your concern.
That makes a big difference.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Doug?
Well, I think, in my mind, I think this opens Williamsburg up for another niche type of business, and gives existing business and maybe some future B&Bs that may come in the appropriate areas to have an opportunity to compete in this wedding and special event kind of business, which kind of, again, diversifies our offering, to visitors. And I'm not so concerned about the numbers. I think there's probably only a few bed and breakfasts that can really compete effectively in this market, because of their location, the street, the parking, the availability of some sort of off-site parking that people could be bused in or shuttled in. And so I think we're only really looking at a few that would take advantage of this to any great size, 30-plus people. Some of the smaller B&Bs may do smaller events, but I totally support this. I think this is a step in the right direction and helps our businesses have another opportunity to be that much more successful.
I support it, too, for the very same reasons. I think this is a good thing to expand opportunity.
May I add something to Mr. Pond's comment? Thank you for mentioning the small wedding issue. Williamsburg is a wonderful place to get married. More people should do it, then they should keep coming back on their anniversary. But to organize, plan, and conduct a small wedding in this community is a real challenge, because there are limited facilities where you can do this, because in the hotel environment, it's just challenging to handle these small groups this way. And so I don't see this in any way as competition. It's really, it's adding an additional level of service to what our guests are looking for. And I think from that standpoint, it's very helpful.
And I'll echo the remarks, but Reed, I also hope you will take our thanks to Planning Commission. I know they had multiple meetings and put a lot of thought and effort into this, and I think we've got a good ordinance as a result of that. So I hope you'll convey that thanks to them. With that, I'll take a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move the approval of proposed ordinance 14-13.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Ms. Walton, would you call the roll, please?
Aye.
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 Our third public hearing today is PCR 14-011, ED Economic Development District Revisions, Proposed Ordinance 14-14. Mr. Nestor.
Quarter Path Williamsburg LLC has submitted plans for a 157-unit townhome and manor home development, 115 townhomes and 42 manor homes. As part of the proposal, Riverside Healthcare Association Incorporated and Quarter Path Williamsburg LLC have submitted a package of changes to the ED district to accommodate the proposed development, and staff worked with them in developing the proposal. This is the ED district, everything except the Quarter Path Crossing Shopping Center on the west side of Quarter Path Road is part of the Quarter Path at Williamsburg development. This is the proposed townhomes, and it's right behind the Aura Apartments, 227 units. It's now under construction, and just down the street from Doctor's Hospital. And this is Battery Boulevard and the Quarter Path Crossing Shopping Center. On May 14th, the Planning Commission approved with conditions the development plan for these townhouses. And this is the development plan. Again, the Aura Apartments are down here. This is the large village green if you've driven down there. And there are 3 basic unit types in this development. There are 20-foot wide townhomes. There are 35-foot wide townhomes. And there are 2 groups of manor homes. And these are the conceptual elevations of the 3 unit types. In the manor homes, there's 2 different manor home designs. This is the design for the ones in the center of the development. I would point out that, unlike most new development in the city, this area is not in a corridor protection district. It is not subject to review by the Architectural Review Board. Planning Commission has authority to approve site plans and subdivisions. There are a number of proposed changes that I'll go over now. Duplex dwellings and attached duplex dwellings are added as a permitted use. Right now, you can have multifamily, meaning apartments or condominiums, and townhouses. And the manor homes are attached duplexes. So for this building, the property line really goes down the middle, and it's flat over flat on each side. That's not a use that's allowed in that district now. This is in the center of the development on Green Hill Street. This is a grouping of the manor homes. And really, if they were not on individual flat over flat lots, this could be done as a multifamily development, and it would be condominiums. So what the change to allow attached duplexes does is it allows a different ownership type. It really doesn't allow a different use type. And even so, this use type is consistent with the multifamily and townhouses that are also allowed. Other changes, townhouse definition is revised to allow a 2-unit row if the average is 3 units in a row. There is 1 2-unit row here. So that's just a little bit more flexibility allowed for townhouse layouts. The minimum width for non-townhouse lots reduced to 25 feet. Again, that's to accommodate the attached duplexes. There's side yard requirements are reduced to 5 feet when adjacent to public streets or private alleys. We have some instances now where we already have 5 feet, some instances when we don't. This makes it uniform throughout the zoning district. Rear yards reduced from 15 to 7.5 feet. And the economic development parking district, there's a separate district that covers this area, is revised to allow all of the on-street parking in a subdivision that abuts individual lots to be counted toward the required parking. In townhouses, for example, require 2 spaces on the lot, and all the townhouses have a 2-car garage accessible from an alley. But that also requires a quarter space for visitor parking. So there's plenty of visitor parking to meet that requirement throughout the adjacent streets. But the parking, now you can count the parking on-street parking, but it has to be immediately adjacent to the lot. Now, you won't in all cases have parking immediately adjacent to the lot. The manor homes have 1 garage parking space for each unit. They need 2, so the second parking space will be an on-street parking space, and in some cases, those are not adjacent to the building. So this, basically, when you draw a box around the entire subdivision, it allows all of the on-street parking in that box to count toward meeting the parking requirement. And for example, in Aura Apartments, they were able to count the reverse angle parking on Battery Boulevard toward meeting their requirements. So the idea here was to not require more parking than we need, and to allow the on-street parking to be considered. So overall, when you're looking at the changes that are proposed here, these will allow additional on-right flexibility for developing the residential areas of the quarter path at Williamsburg development. You know, right now there are over 800 dwelling units allowed in the ED section, and up to 40% of the property in the ED section can be used exclusively for residential use. With what's been approved to date, that's 43% of the allowable dwelling units in the ED district, plus north of Tutter's Neck Pond, that'd be another 468 dwelling units that would be allowed. Planning Commission held a public hearing on May 14th on this request. On the zoning changes, they also considered the subdivision development plan illustrated by this slide, and they recommended to City Council by a vote of 5-1 that the proposed changes to the ED district be approved as detailed in proposed ordinance 14-14, and based on the Commission's recommendation, the suggested council action would be to approve proposed ordinance 14-14.
Great. Thank you, Reed. Before I open the public hearing, I'll come back to council for any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Nestor, you referenced the Aura Apartments were able to count the Battery Boulevard parking spaces, reverse angle spaces in their total. Is that on both sides of the Battery?
No, just immediately adjacent to the apartment. Now, in the case here, the parking spaces have to be adjacent to the area being subdivided. So, for example, there are, to be counted, the parking space, parallel parking spaces on the opposite side of Redoubt Road can't be counted as provided parking for this, and the parking spaces on the opposite side of Eastview Road over here can't be counted.
Thank you.
Scott?
Nothing in particular.
No
questions.
Judy?
The yellow dots are the parking spaces or the entrance?
Oh, no, the yellow dots are the trees.
It's fall.
It's fall, okay.
There are a lot more parking spaces than there are trees.
Well, I wondered about that, but the alley you referred to for the townhouses, that's the entrance to the garages, is
Right,
that one right there?
There's, for the 20-foot wide townhouses, there's an alley along there. For the 35-foot wide townhouses, they front on Prospect Street and North Ridge Street, and there's a central alley serving the townhouses on both sides. And the manor homes here and these manor homes are also garages come off the alley, so there's no garage doors at all that you will see from the streets.
So the other side of the alley by the townhouses, is that parking for the apartments?
On this side,
Yeah.
correct, yeah, this is parking lot here for Aura Apartments, and this is parking lot here for, the Aura Apartments is split by Greenhill Street. So you have the apartment buildings here, apartment parking lots,
And how many apartments are there?
there are 227 apartments plus one model unit, 157 townhomes and neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Reed, thank you very much. Appreciate that. With that, I'll open the public hearing and ask anyone who wishes to address this issue to please come forward, state your name and address. Not seeing any, I'll close the public hearing and come back to council for discussion and action.
I'm guessing there's a lack of public interest because nobody lives here yet. A lot of it makes sense to me in a way because I think what they're looking for here is more of an urban environment as opposed to a suburban environment. So the smaller setbacks and the density, if you can preserve green space in other areas, that's great. I worry a little bit that the parking overall gets tight. There's just not a lot of margin here. And when commercial gets developed, this is a north, southeast, west orientation to the southeast of Village Green and Battery Boulevard. Granted, they have the on-street parking on that side of Battery Boulevard, but that doesn't mean that residents and guests won't be parking over there already. So I just think we need to be thinking about this in the bigger term when we get to further aspects of this development, because it's like I said, there's just not a lot of margin for error.
Do you think we ought to consider changing the parking ordinance?
It's hard to say when staff feels comfortable with this and planning commission feels comfortable with it, and we don't know from experience how it's going to work out yet. So I'll just leave that and see what my colleagues say.
This isn't a position I would typically take, but these folks aren't going to build a project that is going to be underserved. You're not going to have adequate parking to serve their needs. I think oftentimes we lay out a little too much parking, and you end up with something that's built for Thanksgiving and Christmas type holidays where there's all kinds of people in one place versus something that's every day. Take the shopping center there at Quarter Pad. You rarely go there when that parking lot is any more than half full. And I think, especially with our recent discussion about downtown, I think sometimes less parking actually works. So I'm not so concerned about that point.
Well, I think I get it. I mean, it's going to be very tight, and this is going to be a new environment that we're just not familiar with in the city, and certainly in any of our lifetimes we haven't been part of this type of development and haven't seen it. And I think as the rest of this parcel starts to develop, we'll understand better what it was that was approved some time ago. So I'm okay with the setbacks. I guess it's unfortunate in my mind that this doesn't fall under some ARB or some sort of guidelines, only because I would like to, as this is new, we do have a standard that I think we try to adhere to. When we developed High Street, there was a commitment to using top-of-the-line products so that the buildings would stand the test of time and not be fragile. And I don't think we've heard that in this case. And I know that's not part of the question here. It's just one of my feelings. I think there was some discussion at Planning Commission that, while it makes sense from a development position, are we ensuring that we get the quality product and type of housing that we want to see in the city? And I just hadn't heard that there's a commitment to that.
I agree with that. I'm uncomfortable that there isn't another level of looking at what the final product's going to look like. I've also, and I've talked to a few people about this, there is no requirement for a portion of this being set aside for moderately priced housing. And I do worry about that, although market forces may push that a little bit. But I do think we need to think in the city about the people who are working at the hospital, for example. If be a nice place for the people working at the hospital to live if they can afford it. And salaries aren't real high in hospitals. So I hope people are thinking about moderately priced housing in here. So that's all.
Well, let me just say that I've given up on raising the topic of inclusionary zoning. I don't know how many times I can bring this up for us to consider, so that there are guidelines in place before somebody comes in to develop a plan, so they know going into it what to expect. And
Right.
I think we missed that opportunity.
We missed the boat.
And as we did, so I'll leave that alone. And I take Mr. Foster's point about anybody wanting to develop a successful product, particularly on the commercial side, isn't going to want to build something with less than the parking that they really need. But that kind of begs the question, then why do we have parking requirements? Why don't we just leave it up to people to determine their own? And in some ways in the downtown area, we're doing that. So I think that in the broader scope of the overall development, I just think we need to be careful not to limit parking too much. I don't want to see a big sea of asphalt that serves no purpose other than to meet what some people might consider an arbitrary regulation, but I don't think the regulation's arbitrary. So,
And I think, too, when that commercial development comes along, we'll have a better sense of what the issues are and then can incorporate that in that planning. In terms of the look, I mean, one of the reasons this property was sold to Riverside, and one of the reasons we've been working with Riverside, is because they have a vision and a sense of quality that is consistent with the city of Williamsburg. And I mean, I think that for me, provides an awful lot of comfort in what's going to happen here. If it were someone I didn't know as well and someone we hadn't worked with as long, I might have concerns, but those concerns for me have been allayed by what we've seen from Riverside and their approach and everything else they do. So I'm less concerned about that. I think the parking is a question, but also by the time that comes along, we will have had experience with this and have an opportunity to step in and say what's really needed in that situation.
yeah, and I'm not advocating we not support this. I'm saying something we need to be very careful about going forward.
Yeah, certainly. Any other comments? If not, I'll take a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve proposed ordinance number 14-14.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Ms. Walton, will you call the roll, please?
Aye.
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 Before we go to the next public
Yes.
hearing, can I ask Mr. Nestor
Yes.
a question? Did he escape?
No, Mr. Nestor.
Could I ask you a question, Mr. Nestor? This development is not in, as you mentioned, in the corridor protection district or anywhere that's going to require architectural review. Do we offer the opportunity for any developer or builder, residential or otherwise, who might be interested, the opportunity to come before architectural review and present what their project looks like and just have benefit of the input of the ARB, even if they're not bound to follow it?
We don't have any formal procedure to do that, but I don't think there would be an objection.
Could we possibly extend that invitation in this case? Because, and I say that simply, again, as Mayor Holman said, it's not that we don't trust that the folks who are developing this are going to try to do the best job they can. But time and time again, I've seen people come in with the best of intentions, walk out after ARB saying, you know, I ended up with a better product as a result of this process. And particularly when they won't be bound by the recommendations of ARB, I think there might be some value in that additional level of consultation. So I just ask if staff could consider extending that invitation at some point, if That's a,
Yeah, no, I think, and your point that I think all of us have had conversations with people who go into the ARB process with some trepidation, but come out saying, wow, I'm really glad I did that, and we've got a better product as a result of it. And I hear that time and time again. So,
If I could, while you're there, can you, and you may not have the numbers on top of your head, but can you recap how many houses or residential units we're talking about in the Riverside?
There's,
Total.
the total, including the area north of Tutter's Neck Pond, is 1,367 dwelling units.
Okay, so we got more than half to come.
Yeah.
Okay.
we're over 40% now.
Well, that's over 40% just in the ED district.
ED district,
Right.
yeah.
There's, 800-plus units in the ED district and 468 units north of the pond, which is an exclusively residential.
That's right.
And I kind of asked that question because as we move forward, there may be the opportunity for that inclusionary zoning conversation to be had in advance.
Okay.
And I would mention on the area north of Tutter's Neck Pond, that is zoned RS2. That allows 3 dwelling units per net acre. The 468 dwelling units is, you can do a single-family only cluster subdivision up to 5 units an acre, or you can rezone to a PDR district with a variety of housing types, which requires, so you either have a special use permit or a rezoning to get the full density, so that would come before council at some point in the future, most likely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reed. That's helpful. Our next public hearing is PCR 14-13, revisions to Article 8, Chesapeake Bay Preservation, proposed ordinance 14-15. Mr. Nestor, we're working you hard today.
I don't have any slides for this, unfortunately. I will summarize this case by saying we don't have a choice. The city was reissued a new stormwater permit in 2013 that requires the city to meet new stormwater regulations, and more of this will be later on in the agenda. So as part of all the updates, we need to update the Chesapeake Bay Preservation section of the zoning ordinance to reflect the changes being made to our stormwater management plan and related ordinances. And if you look at the ordinance, you can see primarily these are changing references to other ordinances and sections, so it's primarily technical in nature. Planning Commission held their public hearing in May. No one spoke at the hearing. They recommended by a 6-0 vote that these changes be made. So to implement the Commission's recommendation, you would need to adopt the proposed ordinance as written.
Thank you, Reed. Any questions before I open the public hearing? There's not much choice here. Okay. With that, I'll open the public hearing. If anyone wishes to address this, please come forward and state your name and address. Not seeing any, I'll close the public hearing and come back to council for an abbreviated discussion and action.
nothing.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move the council approve proposed ordinance 14-15.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Newsom?
Aye.
Mr. Connor?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland?
Aye.
Mr. Coster?
Aye.
Thank you. Our final public hearing today is the Enterprise Zone application, proposed resolution 14-07. Michelle?
Good afternoon again, Mayor and members of council. Today, I'm giving a presentation about the city applying for a Virginia Enterprise Zone designation. And you'll remember it was exactly 1 year ago that we visited doing this last year, to be repetitive. So today I'll talk about what is the state Virginia Enterprise Zone, what is our application strategy, and how is it different from last year, what are the physical areas that we're proposing be designated as zones, what are the local incentives that the EDA and I are proposing that City Council adopt as part of this package, and then the next steps. So again, this should all look very familiar. The state program has not changed, but our strategy has changed a little bit. So I'll go. And I'm sorry I don't have any pictures. This is all text and maps, so bear with me. So the Enterprise Zone program is a partnership between the state and local governments who are selected to participate. And it's a incentive program to encourage investment in jobs and capital investment in certain areas of the state. The state provides incentives to businesses located in those areas, in the zones, and they include grants for real property investments between $100,000 and $200,000, and then job grants between $500 and $800 per job, depending on the distress criteria of your locality and the wage rate and the benefits associated with the job. And part of the application and proof to the state that you're interested in a willing partner is what will the locality provide in terms of local incentives to these businesses for them to locate or expand in these areas. The program was revamped in 2005. Used to be 60 zones across the state, and they're in the process of ramping it down to 30 zones statewide. So it's becoming more and more competitive to achieve one of these zone designations. So our strategy last year was to submit a regional application, which was a wonderful idea, and we were optimistic, although we knew the odds were slightly against us. And it turned out that the bonus points we gained for applying as a region did not offset the fiscal stress scores that were lowered because our counties have a lower fiscal stress score than we do. So even if we had scored, so the applications are scored based on two things. Half of the application is scored based on your fiscal stress that the state determines based on your unemployment rate and your free lunch count at schools, and the other half is based on your strategy, your narrative, and your incentives that you submit to the state. We did learn last year that even if our narrative side had received a perfect score, our fiscal stress side was too low for us to even come near the lowest scoring locality that won. So if it makes sense, so we're going it alone because our fiscal stress is 356, while York County is 38 and James City County is 41. So you can see there's quite a differential there. And the regional strategy was not enough to convince Richmond to do that for us. So we're disappointed, but we're also optimistic that the city has a case here, and we can work in this highly competitive environment. But I will say, just to be clear and to manage expectations, our odds are still probably a little bit lower than 50-50. There's quite a few localities applying, and to give you a sense, we're at 356 distress criteria, where Emporia and Petersburg are in the 730s. So while we're high, we're not as high as other localities that will be going up against us. So the way the program works is the state allows us to designate up to 3 different physical areas of the city, and it provides an acreage minimum to maximum of what we can designate. So we've selected the same 2 areas as last year, which are the Northeast Triangle, where Capitol Landing Road, 2nd Street, and York Street are the commercial corridors, and Midtown, where the Arts District and the shopping centers are located. As you know, both of those areas are identified in your goals and initiatives, as well as the Economic Development Plan, as areas where we want to focus redevelopment and investment attention. So here's the Northeast Triangle section of the city, and to get a closer look, this is, it's hard to see with this light, I apologize. It's green on the actual printed map, the areas that we are selecting, but it's basically how do I do the pointer? All right. The commercial areas on York Street, up along Penniman, 2nd Street, and then up Capitol Landing Road are the areas that are designated all the way up to the beaches, and then down to the Quarter Path Inn or the Yorkshire Steakhouse on York Street. So that is the area designated in the Northeast Triangle. And Midtown is this area of the city where the shopping centers and the Arts District are located. And I apologize, the green is not showing up, but here's the Williamsburg Shopping Center, the Monticello Shopping Center, the Staples Building. So it's the area in this district up to the Bypass Road intersection, the commercial area on both sides of Richmond Road, down Monticello, and then into the Arts District. So it's that commercial area right there that's included. So to go over our local incentives, very similar to last year, except last year we were keeping ourselves exactly on par with the counties in the way that their taxes were assessed. So some of our percentages were 48.7, and this year we've streamlined it to be increments of 10. So you'll see that when I bring that chart up. Otherwise, it's the same concepts. And everything we're talking about is new revenue. So the city will not forgo any existing tax revenue. This is all based on any new investment, new businesses, and expansion that will come into the city. And they're based on real property tax, our BPOL fee, and permit fee waivers, and then technical assistance and marketing assistance that the EDA has agreed to provide. So the top three are the ones that we're asking council to authorize, since those are parts of tax revenue, new tax revenue that will come in. Real property tax incentive, we've set a threshold that anyone who invests more than $500,000 in capital improvements on a project, and again, this can be a new project or an expansion of a business, will receive a portion of their new real property tax back as a grant. And it's based, these are the same numbers you see in the Arts District that we use. It's a declining scale over 5 years. The first year, they will receive 50% of what they pay the city back as a grant based on that new tax revenue they're paying on their expansion. In year 2, it's 40%, and on down to 10% in year 5. And your packets include examples of different levels of expenditure, and you'll see as they total it up what the city keeps in its coffers and what goes out as a grant. The BPOL tax incentive is set up the exact same way. This is set up more for businesses who could be a tenant, whereas the other one is a business who probably owns the facility, isn't investing a large amount of money into real property improvements. This one is set up more for someone who could be leasing or doing less intensive investments. So it's based on their gross sales on BPOL tax. So the investment level is lower at $50,000, or they could do it by creating 5 new full-time jobs. So there's an option there. And this will be a portion of their new BPOL tax revenue that they pay. If they're new business, it's all new. If they're an expanding business doing one of these two things, it's that new BPOL tax that they pay. The same ratios, 50% the first year, on down to 10% the 5th year. And then the other incentive is improvement fee waivers. We do this in the Arts District as well, where projects that qualify in one of these zones, we will waive the fees for any permits they receive. So I've listed the common ones: zoning, building, land disturbing, subdivisions, site plans, those type of fees. We've agreed to waive those, or we're suggesting that you agree to waive those. And then the other incentives I mentioned were around technical assistance and marketing and things that the EDA has put on the table through its programs. And they include a demolition loan with a slightly different criteria than now. It's based on a percentage of the investment instead of a flat cash fee. They've agreed to put that on the table, as well as marketing and technical assistance to make the local incentive stronger. The timeline, the applications are due June 30th, and I wanted to make sure I shared with you last year we hired a consultant to do this work, along with York and James City County. And this year, Corinne Blackford is working as part of the economic development team, and she's our consultant. So she's been working really hard on this application, and it still has a couple weeks left to get this done. So hats off to her, and thanks to her for all that she's done for that effort. The application will be submitted June 30th, will be reviewed during the summer. The governor's office typically announces them sometime in the fall. We can't predict when that would be. And we'll know by January 1st, that's when the designation would take effect. So if that happens, we would come back to City Council to actually ask you to adopt an ordinance that specifies these incentives that I've outlined here. And then the Economic Development Office, so that would be Corinne again, will administer the program and make sure our businesses know about it. I've had a lot of questions about, we're probably having a new business come into one of these areas that you heard about earlier today, whether they would qualify, and it would be based on when they get their CO, their certificate of occupancy, from the building official. If we get the zone, and that happens after January 1st, they could then qualify for the real property tax incentives from the state. These are just close-ups of the zone, if you wanted to zoom into anything. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Michelle, thank you very much, and Corinne, thank you for your efforts on this too. We really appreciate that. Any questions for staff before we do the public hearing?
I have two. Ms. DeWitt, you talked about the Arts District commercial area.
Mm-hmm.
That does not include the entire Arts District?
It does not. Our Arts District, I can zoom into that, includes a residential piece. This side of Lafayette Street is residential zoned, and of course our zoning ordinance does allow for live-work uses to go there, but that is not part of the state is looking for actually commercially zoned areas, so we did cut the zone into the commercial area, so it kind of goes like that.
So if somebody lived on the railroad track side of Lafayette and they were looking to put in some kind of studio that required some significant equipment investment, they would not qualify?
No, but they would qualify for the Arts District incentives.
And when you were talking about the incentives, you mentioned the local capital investment incentive and then the business investment incentive. And the one is a grant equal to some percentage of their property tax, and the other is a grant related to a percentage of the people.
Exactly.
Can they double dip?
Yes, they can.
Because I was just the way it sounded. Sounded like one was only intended for people who are building a business, and the other was only intended for people who are renting. But if you qualify for both, you're eligible.
You can do both.
Okay.
Although in practicality, it would probably be they'd qualify for one or the other. A large investor, perhaps in the shopping center area, might become a landlord, and so then he would qualify for that real property, while his tenants could qualify for the B-POL. If he was a landlord in the operating business, he could do both. He or she.
Thank you.
Scott?
So before you open the public hearing, I did want to state for the record that I do own a piece of property in what were proposed ED, not ED, but the enterprise zone, but it won't affect my ability to fairly and openly discuss the matter without bias.
With that, I'll open the public hearing and ask anyone who wishes to address this matter, please come forward. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and come back to council for discussion and action.
Ms. DeWitt, I'm going to have a few more questions. I just think it's really disappointing that the regional approach did not work with the last year's application of the enterprise zone, because it really is an effort of the three localities to work together in a complementary, non-competitive manner to point out the benefits and advantages of operating a business in the historic triangle. And if we didn't score well, I guess we can't do anything about that. But as much as I'm in favor of this, it's also a little disappointing that we then have to go out on our own without being able to bring our local partners with us. So that's where a couple of my questions come from. In the scoring of an application, if a community already has an enterprise zone designation, does that somehow get counted against them in the application for an additional one in order to spread these opportunities around, or is there any consideration at all given to that?
We are told by the state that that does not affect their review. And to give you an example, Newport News has 3 zones, 3 separate designations. So the state saying that, they've also showed that as well.
And doesn't James City County have an enterprise zone?
James City County does have an enterprise zone that will expire at the end of 2015.
And was it just, and if you don't know the answer, that's fine, but was it just a less competitive process when that was awarded, or were their scores different? Do you have any idea?
That was 20 years ago, and I'm afraid I don't. I'm sorry.
Where's Mr. Nestor? He would know.
But I will add, I mean, I say I don't, but it was probably a newer program and less people applying, and they were maybe one of the first, so.
A different world.
The one thing that's also interesting about this is the different ways the state perceives the fiscal strength or stress of a community. And Williamsburg has a comparatively high score with our neighbors on the fiscal stress level, but it doesn't play out in the local composite index that's used for school funding. And I don't know, I sort of understand the distinctions, but I have a hard time reconciling the two. It seems like there ought to be a greater balance there. But that's just a comment.
You're asking for logic.
I think this is a terrific opportunity for us to pursue. I think we definitely should do it. As mentioned, it's disappointing we can't do it with our regional partners. But it's not because we didn't try, and it's not because they didn't want to participate. We all wanted to do this together. So I certainly hope this is successful. I fully support it, and Corinne, we're all counting on you to fill out a great application.
Scott?
Just echo what Paul said. Let's you're cautiously optimistic, but I think
It's my job to be optimistic.
that's right. Looking forward to seeing what we find out.
Well, I'm very appreciative of this. If it works, I think hopefully it'll have good results. Williamsburg is challenged in ways that other communities aren't, James City County and York County, in that we don't have a lot of green fields to develop. And so the barrier of entry for a new business to come in and build something, or there's a demolition involved in it. And so it's a little bit more, cost prohibitive for somebody to do that. So whatever we can do to incentivize redevelopment is a good thing. So I support this.
I also support.
Same here, so I'll take a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that City Council adopt Ordinance 14-07, authorizing a Virginia Enterprise Zone application for 2015 designation.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Ms. Walton, would you call the roll, please?
Aye.
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 Thank you all for a string of public hearings. Staff did a very good job on all of that, so thank you all for that. Our next order of business is reports. The first, monthly financial statements. Jack, anything?
Just one thing to point out, we're now 11 months through the fiscal year in terms of current cash reporting. And when you compare where we are this now compared to 12 months ago, it's very close in terms of we're about 1.1 million ahead in revenue and about 1.1 million ahead or more spending. So that puts us in just about the same position we were last year. But as we all know, we have to go through a final month and then go through all of the accrual that the finance department will be doing to move things to the appropriate point where they need to be recognized. So we'll see where we end up with the final degree of year-end surplus. But what we appear, just again, on a cash basis, and it's not reliable for that reason, but about where we were last year.
Disappointing, I think all of us are concerned with this, but we look forward to the future. Monthly operating reports, anything in particular, James?
Just one thing to point out, if you look under the city manager metrics, at the end of that, we have a lot of economic development information, and the IT department, finance department, and economic development department have been working for some time to improve the reporting we get out on room occupancy, and it's simply because it's more complex due to when reporting occurs and how we pull that all together. But if you look at those last 5 lines, we do know with accuracy the total number of hotel and B&B rooms that are available at any point in time, and that's reflected. And then we know month to month just how many room nights have been sold versus how many room nights are available. They, again, have to be lined up based on when the reporting occurs, and then come out with a citywide occupancy rate that we can see year-to-date as well as month-to-month. This month is the same month 12 months ago. So currently, we are year-to-date at a 38.36% occupancy rate as opposed to last year at this time of 37.36%. And for instance, for the month, a 42% occupancy as opposed to 39.1%. But notice that the main reason that's true is because our number of rooms has been reduced considerably from what it was at the same time last year due to the number of transactions in the city that have reduced the number of available rooms. Our overall revenues, as we all know, for hotel for room taxes continues to be down from where it was in the prior years. That slide continues. But I think that my point was I believe that these metrics are about as precise and reliable as we can get to track this month to month.
And that gives us information to play off of the discussion we had in Monday's work session as well. So thank you for adding that. City manager reports. We have 3. First, stormwater management.
Yes, Mr. Small will give this report.
Aaron, welcome.
Thank you, sir. Although there's a lot of words on this slide, I'll try to keep this brief because I think we all went over this in detail in the March work session. What I'm bringing forth today for your consideration is 3 items. Our updated stormwater management ordinance, our revised erosion sediment control ordinance, as well as some fees associated with those. The updated stormwater management ordinance, as I mentioned, is due to the regulations. Mr. Nestor had mentioned the regulations related to Ches Bay. These are the same things. It's all promulgated by the response to meeting the targets of the Chesapeake Bay TMDL statewide. So with those changes in the regulations, which go into effect on July 1, we need to update our stormwater ordinance to reflect those changes. The major changes in the stormwater management ordinance, which about doubled in size in terms of number of words, it's the updates of the development standards to these new kind of statewide water quality requirements. They're a little more stringent than what we had before. An update of just some wording in our illicit discharge language, and setting those program requirements for the issuance of the Virginia Stormwater Management Program, known as the VSMP, activity permits for construction. And then finally, some just language shifts because of the program shifting over from DCR to DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality. Tried to minimize the number of acronyms out there for you. So. The erosion sediment control ordinance is basically just changes similar to what we did in the Ches Bay ordinance, where we just changed some references to state regulations as well as cross-references to the stormwater management ordinance. And again, that shift from the Department of Conservation and Recreation to Department of Environmental Quality. And then our final third item that we will be presenting is the fees associated with these construction permits from the Virginia Stormwater Management Program, as well as updating our regional BMP and open space credits that we for nutrient credit training. And then I wanted to point out back in March we had mentioned that we would also be looking at our Williamsburg Stormwater Management Plan. Not quite ready for prime time. It is. I just got the final draft just yesterday, and so we wanted to make sure we reviewed that and get it I's dotted and T's crossed before we bring it forth to you in July.
Terrific.
So, and with that, I will answer any questions.
And thank you very much. Are there any questions? I have a question for Ms. Shelton. Do we need to do these as individual, or can we do them as one motion?
In this instance, I think you need to do them individually.
Individually, okay.
May I ask Mr. Small
Yeah,
a question?
please.
establishment of the VSMP fees,
Yes.
is that something that we're given the ability to do, or is that something that we are required to do?
There is a portion of the fee, it's 28% of the state recommended fee, goes back to DEQ. So really, at a minimum, we don't have to establish a fee. If we establish no fee, we still have to write a check to DEQ for every permit we issue in those categories. So really, do we want to do that? We can. But the state fee that we're recommending is what was recommended throughout the state, and I don't know that James City County and York County have already established those fees to the state recommended schedule, and that's what we recommend sticking.
Okay, that's helpful to know.
The fees associated with our BMP access credits and open space, all we're doing there is just updating them to be more current, because these were originally set about 15 years ago. So we just need to bring them up.
That's an optional?
That is also an optional. That is actually a fee. We currently charge $5,000 per phosphorus credit in our ordinance, and we're just recommending we take that up to $8,000 per phosphorus credits.
But does a developer have to pay that, or can they do their own mitigation and avoid?
If they want to pay for their own BMP on site,
Right.
they have that option, yes.
So,
Scott, any questions? Okay, I'll take a motion first on stormwater management, proposed ordinance 14-16.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that council adopt ordinance 1416-16, amending and restating Article 1, Chapter 7, Stormwater Management.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Walton?
Ms. Newsom.
Aye.
Mr. Pond.
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland.
Aye.
Mr. Foster.
Aye.
Next is the erosion and sediment control.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that council adopt ordinance 14-17, amending and restating Article 2, Chapter 7, Erosion and Sediment Control.
Second.
Have a motion? Second?
Ms.
Okay.
Newsom.
Aye.
Mr. Pond.
Aye.
Mayor Palmer.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland.
Aye.
Mr. Foster.
Aye.
And finally, the construction permit fee schedule.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that we approve the fee schedule for, oops, it just went off. Sorry. For VSMP construction permits and the regional BMP and open space credit programs.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Walton?
Ms. Newsom.
Aye.
Mr. Pond.
Aye.
Mayor Palmer.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland.
Aye.
Mr. Foster.
Aye.
Aaron, thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing you again in July.
Thank you, sir.
Exciting stuff.
You got
Next
it.
is the supplemental appropriations and transfer for general fund and law enforcement block grant funds.
Deputy Finance Director Vicki Herrick will give this report.
Vicki, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Before you, you have proposed resolution 14-06, which is just a resolution for supplemental appropriations and including one transfer for FY 2014 for 3 funds. And these are the FY 14 budget amendments that we need for grants that were received throughout the year. So we are asking for the general fund due to grants be increased by $47,376. Sales tax fund, because of a grant and a transfer from reserves for some interest cost, needs to be increased by $75,673. And then, of course, our law enforcement block grant fund needs to be increased by $4,657 for some grants. I would like to thank staff, especially the police department, the fire department, and landscaping this year, for all the work that goes involved in applying and being responsible for these grants, and for communicating with finance. We're just a real good team that we make sure that we do what we have to do, and a lot of effort does go into it. So I just wanted to say that. If you have any questions on any of the grants,
Thank you,
I'm more than
Vicki.
happy to answer.
Any questions at this point?
No, sir.
No, sir. Okay, thank you. Any discussion?
I'd just like to echo Ms. Herrick's comments about thanking staff and everybody involved, because these all add up to help our financial position, except for maybe the interest costs. But we did that for a very good reason, too. And it's just encouraging that there's the ability and wherewithal to continue to pursue these.
Sure. It'd be very easy not to.
Right.
So, yeah, kudos to all the staff that pay attention to these opportunities and help realize them.
I'll take a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve proposed resolution 14-06, a resolution amending the general fund, sales tax fund, and law enforcement block grant fund budgets for the city of Williamsburg.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Walton?
Aye.
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 Third is the VRS employer contribution rate election.
Yes, I'll do this. The VRS requires that City Council take action by resolution to state the amount of employer contribution for the year that's coming up in FY15. You've already approved this in the budget that was adopted in May. However, again, the state requires that you do it by formal resolution. You have a choice to adopt a contribution rate less than the full amount, which is 17.04%, if you wanted to pay less now and then pay more later into the pension fund. Obviously, you've already determined that you don't want to do that in the action you've taken with the budget. So this action is more perfunctory than anything else, but necessary.
Any questions?
I do have a question. What is the rationale for this? Is by adopting this resolution, do we somehow codify that we can't do something else later on?
No, you're acting simply for 1 year. The state, at the time that the new requirements were put in place and which required contribution rates to go up to some degree, and also given the fact that the General Assembly has chosen over many years not to fund the full rate as prescribed by VRS, the state gave to localities the option of paying less now and basically paying less on the mortgage now and paying more on the mortgage later. So that's the reason you have the choice to pay less if you wanted to.
Well, not about the city, but just in general. That hasn't worked well in the past, so I'm happy for us not to do that.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I'll take a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that City Council approve proposed Resolution 14-05, certifying the full employer contribution rate of 17.04% for the City of Williamsburg for next fiscal year.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Walton?
Aye.
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 Our next report is the city mobile app demonstration. Mark?
IT Director Mark Barham will give you an overview of something new.
Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Holman and members of council. Give me a couple of seconds to get this up here. I'm going to demonstrate this, and I apologize first to Mr. Frawley and Ms. Knudsen for having to sit through this presentation again. But I'm going to do this live and without a net. So if I fail miserably, but I tried. What you're looking at here is the city's new mobile app. It's named Williamsburg Wayfinder. It's available on the Apple App Store as well as Google Play for Android devices. As most of you are aware, the city's had a mobile app for many years now, 5 or 6 years. The initial app was City 411. It was essentially informational, had a lot of information out there, but no real interactive component outside of allowing folks to submit requests for public works type issues. You didn't pick up my trash, I need a new recycling bin, those types of issues. As part of the current City Council goals, initiatives, and outcomes document, we were tasked with taking the Great City Walks pamphlets, the maps, the printed pamphlets, and digitizing those and making them into a mobile app so folks could use those with their smartphone. Throughout that process, we engaged with several vendors, primarily one vendor down in Chesapeake, the initial costs that came back to us for just the Great City Walks piece was about $80,000. So obviously that was way out of our budget. So we kind of stepped back, did a little more research, and came across a company called GovQA. They're essentially the leading local government-focused web mobile app development company in the United States. They're out of Chicago. We worked with them, and while they didn't have a component specific to the Great City Walks, they had this overarching single pane of glass into the city where we could link and provide all of our services that we provide, via mobile apps and such, out into this one single app. And then we kind of did a workaround, and I'll show you the Great City Walks piece and how we accomplished that. So, again, live and without a net. So this is the welcome screen. When you get to this, this is all organized across the bottom. And I'll try to do two devices at one time. We have a home button. We have a community button, which is essentially the public and the residents that live here, those that visit, and then businesses here as well. You'll notice, too, across the top that we also included links to the city's Twitter feed, Facebook account, and YouTube channel as well. Again, with the idea of taking all of this information and putting it into a single app to deliver out. So just walking through a couple of these buttons here to kind of give you an idea of how this works. In the event where the information already existed, so it was on the city's website, an external website, all we simply did was link to them. In the case of the city's website, it's already mobile friendly, so it works out quite nicely. And examples of those would be the events and news, contact us, as well as the city facilities and parks. Now across the top, we had the same make a request functionality. If I were to go into that, same types of information organized by the type of request that you'd be making. You simply select one of those. You can take pictures, add text notes, audio notes, set your location, upload it. That puts it all into the workflows of the various city departments and systems and allows those departments to act on it. Once they do that, the process is complete, and then the resident or the folks that submitted it are notified as well. Another one on this page is the city facilities and parks. This one is broken down. It's all the city facilities, and it's broken down into various categories here. And a couple that I'll point out is in the case of parks and recreation. So we the thought was to not make the end user have to have a deep understanding of the Parks and Recreation Department, but to have more of an understanding of what you would like to do. So if you wanted to know where you could go have a picnic at a city park, all you had to do was select picnic. It would bring you up all the locations within the city where you could go have a picnic. If you were to select one, for example, it gives you some information, in this case about Quarter Path. You could press that call button. If you were on a smartphone and not an iPad, it would activate the phone feature on your phone, and then call Quarter Path, and you could make any types of reservations, as well as select that map link. That'll give you a Google map, and then you could then get directions out to depart from there. Looking at the visitors section, we have links to the obvious external websites, the Visit Williamsburg, Colonial Williamsburg, a map of the city, some transportation information, as well as weather information. City Shop and Dine is essentially all city shopping and dining facilities or businesses within the city, organized by category. So if you wanted to look through all of the dining options, and these, I will point out, these are in the city only, specifically in the city. So you could scroll through. If you found one you like, you would select it. That same type of map functionality would come up and then give you the ability to make a phone call as well for reservations, should that be where you'd want to go. Next, on the business tab, and by the way, I purposely skipped community. I'll come back to that in just a second. Same types of information. The EDA, planning and permitting and taxes across the bottom link back to the city's mobile version of the website. But across the top, we have nearby available properties and property information. And as an example, this property information is simply a mobile version of the property information system, and I won't bore anybody with that. One thing that's kind of new to this is this concept of nearby. And what this is this utilizes the GPS functionality of your device So if you were standing in the middle of Merchant Square and you hit nearby, that would bring up all the city facilities and businesses that are closest to you based on your current GPS location. So it's kind of a neat way to kind of see what's around you, and then places that you potentially might want to go have a dinner or what have you. And then lastly, the community section, again, links to facility rentals, the library, the farmer's market, and various other specific topics. And then last, the Great City Walks. This took all of the existing trails and walks that were in the printed map book that was based on the city's GIS system, and we effectively digitized those using some software from a company called iTour Mobile that we took and licensed that to work on this specific area. It gives us a lot of functionality that our GPS system or our GIS system doesn't necessarily give us. And it allows us to go in here and build these and kind of give you an idea of how all this works. We select the, in this case, the William and Mary loop, and it's going to bring up a picture. And then here in a few seconds, it gives you some descriptions about it. Somebody was playing in the background. So I press play on that.
At the heart and soul of the college.
The dulcet tones of an IT director from the great state of Texas.
The Ring Building is the oldest building on the U.S.
So that gives you some information about that, and then you can effectively begin the walk.
Still in academic use.
And then this is going to bring up,
If it's over.
when I get this up, an actual map of the actual walk. And then all of those map markers here are interesting points along the way. So if you had your smartphone out and you were at, in this case, the start and finish of this one, which is at Confusion Corner looking towards the Wren Building.
Start your walking tour of the William and Mary loop.
There you go. Now, I'll stop with that. However, if you were on your phone and you started the trail, you went to that part on Confusion Corner looking towards the Red Building, and you started it. Once you get within a specific radius of those points along the map, you can start it, put your phone in your pocket. As you get to within that radius area, the application will just start talking to you, show you pictures, and kind of give you some interesting points along the way. We currently have that for about 5 of those specific trails. We are licensed for 10 trails, so we can use this technology outside of the Great City Walks in areas that make more sense. So with that, I will stop and be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Again, if someone wanted to have this on their device, what would they do?
They would go to the specific app store for their specific device, the Apple App Store or Google Play if it's an Android device, search Williamsburg Wayfinder, Wayfinder, all one word.
Terrific.
Or you could just find a public school student to help you today. No, I just think this is terrific. And Mark, with the Great City Walks, did each one of those points of interest on the map in that particular route represent a different video and narration?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's great.
Really amazing.
I will say, too, though, just to follow up on Mayor Holland's question, on the social media page of the city's main website is links to this as well. So if you went from your device to the social media page on the city's website, you'd have links to download as well.
How are we helping both residents and visitors to know about this?
We are, as I stated earlier, I gave a presentation this past week to the Business Roundtable group to kind of engage the businesses and such. We've also engaged the library through Kate Hoving to kind of get the word out to residents.
Scott?
Is this a static platform, or do we have the opportunity to add additional features?
It's all based on a content management system. So as needs change, as usage patterns change, we have the ability to link to different sites to change contents, to modify the button that appears and effectively change any aspect of it we desire.
Gotcha. I just see that when you know the nearby places, especially with the restaurants in particular, you know, the opportunity, seems like there'd be a lot of opportunity there to provide additional services to them, even if it's just a reservations phone number or I know it's probably difficult to link to something like Yelp, but
Well, we did. We made that point on Tuesday to the business folks that any type of information that you would like us to add to it, that they could then work through the Economic Development Office, and then they could make those changes. In many cases, we're linking to websites. We have phone numbers, and I would say in the prior themes of the prior that Vicki spoke about in terms of congratulating staff and such. My staff, especially Michelle Wilson and Emmanuel Watkins, or I should say especially Michelle, she spent a lot of time getting this initial upload and working with businesses and ensuring that the information was correct, the phone numbers were correct, the websites were correct and such. So
awesome. That's great. Thank you. Terrific.
Yeah, clearly this is a fabulous app. I would think it's kind of cutting edge. I don't know how many communities have this type of thing. Not aware of any, but what a valuable resource for residents and visitors alike. And just to exemplify Mayor's question about, we've got to get this in the hands of everybody, so, that uses, smartphone technology, because the information's there. I looked up property information, found out about my house while I was sitting here. I mean, the information to the residents is, it's at their fingertips. And then to be able to promote this to visitors to Williamsburg, and whether they stay in the county or in New Purdue's, and if they have this app, they can find a restaurant and eat at, and that's in a sense pays for the time that we spent on this. So congratulations, good work.
Not to mention, Mark saved us a whole bunch of money.
That's right.
We didn't spend $80,000 or whatever it was.
Well, Mark, again, thank you guys, and thank all your team members. And as we've heard multiple times today, we've gotten to the points in various situations where it's really the result of the teamwork of city staff. And so, again, if you'll convey our thanks to them, and we'll look forward to seeing where this takes us.
Ironically, they're in there listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Next, city attorney reports. Do we have any?
Nothing today.
Okay. Schedule of meetings. Jack, anything?
Well, I'd only point out that on July 1, the City Council will have its organizational meeting and swearing-in ceremony, and that will be beginning at 11:45 a.m. at the courthouse of 1770 in the heart of the historic area.
And I would add to that on the June 20th, at 10 o'clock in the morning at the Virginia Port Authority offices, there's an initial, pre-meeting of the Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability Commission to begin, which will come into effect July 1, and that's the body created by the General Assembly for the purpose of spending the money for transportation, but the initial meeting of that group is on that date. Okay. Any unfinished business? New business. We have appointments. Mr. Friley.
This may take a moment. Mr. Mayor, I move that effective July 1st, 2014, City Council reappoint Tanya Boone to the Economic Development Authority for a term to expire June 30, 2018, Gwen Williams and Robert B. Taylor to the Finance and Audit Committee for terms to expire June 30, 2016, Vicki Herrick to the Library Board for a term to expire June 30, 2018, Phil Serra to the Middle Peninsula Juvenile Detention Commission for a term to expire June 30, 2018, Albert O. Lauer to the Thomas Nelson Community College Board for a term to expire June 30, 2018, and Peter Walentish to the Colonial Behavioral Health Board, the Colonial Group Home Commission, the Community Action Agency, and the Old Town Medical Center Board for terms to expire June 30, 2016. I also move that City Council appoint Circuit Judge Michael McGinty to the Colonial Community Criminal Justice Board for a term to expire June 30, 2017, and Patricia Rubline to the Williamsburg Area Arts Commission for a term to expire June 30, 2017.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Walton?
Aye.
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 And again, you can see from that list the importance of community participation in many of the things we do, and we want to thank all the people who have volunteered to do these activities for us, because they're all important for making this community function. So thanks. That brings us to our final agenda item for the day, which is open forum. I have one speaker's card, Mr. Gary Shelley.
Hi, thank you. I'm Gary Shelley, and I live at 205 Indian Springs Road. At last month's council meeting, I urged council to select a new mayor at their next opportunity coming up in July. Council's choice is clear. Select Mayor Hallman again, in spite of his dishonesty and his refusal to hold himself accountable for his actions, or to demonstrate above all else that the council members demand honesty and accountability of themselves. At our meeting in May, a local family appeared in this room and asked that they not be held accountable for an honest mistake they made when they replaced the windows in their home, a mistake which would cost them thousands of dollars to rectify. Their mistake had virtually no consequence for the city. A neighbor of theirs stepped up and spoke before you, and he took responsibility for the misunderstanding and testified that the results of his neighbor's mistake had no impact whatsoever in his neighborhood. The family was in the process of an expensive rehab of their property and had acted in good faith with the city throughout the process. They claimed that the city was trying to strong-arm them into compliance and threatening them with fines that would exceed $3,000 per day if they did not comply with the letter of the law. Our council was unmoved by their appeal and voted unanimously to hold them accountable for their minor transgression. Contrast the honest mistake of this family with Mayor Hallman, your knowing, willful, and deliberate dishonesty in the 110 Harrison Avenue scandal. Your deceit led to a totally unnecessary loss of tens and tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars, as well as untold wasted man hours by our Redevelopment and Housing Authority workforce. It infuriated college students, to whom you have never offered an explanation. In an August 29, 2012 Virginia Gazette article, Councilwoman Judy Knudsen referred to the 110 Harrison Avenue scandal fiasco as a nightmare. This fiasco, this nightmare, would likely never have happened had you been honest and open with the public and not committed the worst offense of all that any public official can make, that being the subversion of our process of governing ourselves. I've gone over this matter many times, and no one has stepped forward to offer any defense for your dishonesty, or challenge the facts as I have presented them, or the facts as presented by the student newspaper, the Virginia Informer. At a city council meeting on January 13, 2011, Ms. Knudsen stated that we are in a lot of trouble in the country because of distrust of government. And if you can't trust a city council made up of people who live in your city, it's hard to understand. No, Ms. Knudsen, if a city has a dishonest mayor and a council that condones his behavior, it's not hard at all to understand. We anxiously await council's decision of who will next represent us as our mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shelley. Anyone else wish to address council on any matter? If not, I believe we have something for closed session. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Mr. Mayor, I move to go into closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of discussing one legal matter per subparagraph 7, for the purpose of consultation on specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by counsel concerning city council policies and procedures manual in response to public comment.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Walton?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
We'll take a 5-minute recess and come back into closed session.